Hi everyone, Adam Steele from Hot Pole Studios here, and today I'm going to be trying to do a bit of a deep dive into what I think makes Tom Sawyer by Rush awesome. First off, I'm going to start off with a huge thanks to Warren Hewitt and Produce Like a Pro because I've been jumping up and down about Rush particularly. I'm a massive fan, and Tom Sawyer in particular for a while, and they were wonderful enough to do an episode all about that's on the Produce Like a Pro channel right now. So if you've already seen that, you'll have seen a little bit of me in this. This is kind of the extended version of breaking down some of Geddy's parts of the song. But yes, Geddy Lee from Rush is a master of many instruments at this point. And Moving Pictures, the album, was done, I think, at a time when synth sounds had been integrated into what Rush were doing, having traditionally before that been kind of a classic prog rock power trio, as you can imagine, having three people on stage, bass, guitar, drums. That can be a wall of sound, but you don't get much of a synth thing in there. Later on, Rush were known as having loads of keyboards and synths, but at this point, this is pretty much all possible to play as one person. It's difficult. It drove me nuts doing this, doing the full version. I had to do lots and lots of takes, but it's technically possible, and it breaks down into 3 different keyboard sounds, bass, and vocals. Now, the song opens with one single note, which is the synth that is the Oberheim OBX. I've got the OBX-A from Arturia on screen, and it's really faithful. I believe the OBX had a slightly kind of grittier, nastier filter, which is where a little bit more of that kind of sound comes from. So this is a little smoother, but really close. And if I hit this E with my foot, that's pretty close. I mean, you're not getting much closer than that as a sound without getting a real Oberheim or really nerding out through every possible virtual version. The Arturia version is fantastic. And so we get that sound at the start of the song to really open it up, and also later on when we come back to a couple of iconic sections. Now, let's talk about the bass. At that time, Geddy Lee was famous for using a Rickenbacker, mostly a 4003, I think, but I think he had 4001s as well. Don't quote me on that. But it has been confirmed by Geddy Lee himself that he had an early 70s jazz bass when they recorded this album and used it on Tom Sawyer. And it sounded a bit like this. Get a little bit more drive on that. And that most of this song, if not all of this song, it's either bass guitar or it's foot pedals. So there's something carrying the low end at all times. Which really helps to bolster that low end, but also means that when there is the top line coming in, which I'll get to in a minute, there is still something underneath keeping everything going. So yeah, let's talk about the bass tone again. When I'm playing, I'm using what I would describe as the more modern Geddy Lee tone, which is an Avalon U5 DI, which is one of the best DI boxes ever made, and a Tech 21 Landmark, which isn't quite what Geddy was using. He was using a Sans amp. The Sans amp from Tech 21 is the thing that it's an effects pedal, but they also made rack mount versions, both of which Geddy used. The Landmark is both of the different Sans amps shoved into a box with a power stage, which I'm not currently using. So this is, to all intents and purposes, the same Sans amp that Geddy was using in the later years, which gave him the similar effect to what he was using in the studio, which I believe was a DI, a cleaner bass amp, like an Ampeg SVT, and a distorted amp, like a Marshall JCM or JMP, whatever it was, that would have been available at that time, and blend them all together, and you get that gritty, thick low end, but also some of the clean top end, which is why I can play relatively gently and get... But I can also play quite hard and get things like the middle section with that. And it's not exactly the Moving Pictures bass sound, but it's pretty close. And I would have to go to great lengths to get the exact tone, knowing that this full well is the kind of sound that get used later on. So that's what I've gone with, because the idea and the principle is the same. Now, the synth lines, we've talked about the bass synth, but there is also a top line, which I believe was also an Oberheim OBX. It's been quoted that it was a mini Moog, and it may well have been. But it's a relatively simple sound with a glide, with the... Now, it's quite a stretch for me on this 88-note keyboard to get all the way to the mod wheel, which I believe would have been much closer on the OBX, but it gives a little bit that kind of wobble, which is why I think this is an OBX and not a mini Moog, because it's a very specific sound that you get on the mod wheel on an OBX. It does this. Which, as you can hear when I go crazy with it, what I think he would have done on stage is hold down the sustain pedal to let that last note ring, put the mod wheel up to full for that crazy wow sound, and then he can let go because of the sustain pedal, put hands on the bass, just in time to get to the 7/8 bridge section. That section. So there's a lot going on, and you have to keep constantly switching your hands over, but this keyboard, like I say, was not designed to be kind of playing up top whilst playing the mod wheel down there whilst having a bass on you, I think. But I think it's an OBX that does that sound. And then later on, because of the portamento, we get the higher one at the end. So later on at the end of the song, it's just played an octave up for extra sonic impact. One thing that I've done with my setup is I've got a MIDI kind of automated switching thing going on. I have no idea how Geddy would have done this live, but I think he would have had a way. And what I'm doing is I'm changing so that my feet in different sections don't play the synth. They play a different higher part, a string synth. So it goes like this. Which you can hear a lot of that string synth top line littered throughout the song. It's very rarely something that stands out as a foreground sound, but it really fills out the tone. Because when, say, Alex Lifeson's doing his kind of picked, that kind of bit in the kind of the pre-bridge sections, I suppose you want to call it, it's a really weird structure, this song. But the bass is chugging away, doing it. But there's kind of an emptiness in the middle, so if I add this in with my feet, it just sits right in the middle here. So that really kind of, it's subtle, but it really fills out a lot. And some of the later sections just have either the root, the E, Or there's one part where I think there's a B that's held. But that would either have to be done with another hand, or because at that point the bass synth is going with the kind of sound, you would have to either have another sound hand, or you'd have to have someone else do that live. I don't think it's so necessary on a live stage because of everything that's going on. But on the studio recording, they obviously felt like it just needed a little bit of kind of a sonic lift. And so, yeah, I think it's an Arpsolina, but it may well be any of the string synths from that time. Of course, this is another classic example of a Rush song where I think they would have come up with the instrumentation first, then fit a vocal line to that, which is why that would explain some of the ridiculously high notes, which I really do kind of struggle to hit. I don't necessarily naturally have that super high voice, and I really have to work for that. So that kind of the what you say about his company is what you say about society. That kind of top E there is tricky. But I can hear in those sections, the sections after that where the bass synth comes back in, we start to hear, and we hear more and more as time goes on with the Rush catalogue, sections that are in a much more reasonable register with the world is love and life are deep. That section is quite reasonable for me to sing. Unlike some of the earlier stuff like 2112, which is just impossible. So yeah, I could go on and on about the lyrics for days, but this is more of kind of the music and the instrumentation. So hope you enjoyed this. Check out the full cover if you haven't already, and the Produce Like a Pro video again if you haven't already, because those were very much the seeds of this video. And thanks again to Produce Like a Pro for letting me do everything on their channel with this. And thanks to everybody involved. Thanks to Cameron, thanks to Jamie. And thanks to you at home for watching. Hit the like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. And thank you, everybody. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye. Hey everyone, that might be the end of the video, but if you fancy carrying on this conversation, we have a Discord server, link is in the description. We're also on Patreon, which is something you can really help us with. We also are on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at Hop Hole Studios. See you there.